Maya Rodriguez had always been the type of person who pushed boundaries. At 28, she was already making a name for herself in marine biology, studying how ocean life adapts to changing climates. Her colleagues often joked that she was more comfortable underwater than on land, but Maya knew that wasn't quite true. She was comfortable anywhere that challenged her. That's exactly what brought her to Alaska in March 2023. The research station at Glacier Bay was remote. It's cold and perfect for the kind of work that could make or break her career. Maya had been awarded a grant to study how marine ecosystems were changing in the Arctic, and she had just 2 weeks to gather the data she needed. The research station was smaller than she expected, just a handful of buildings surrounded by endless wilderness, with mountains rising up like ancient guardians around the bay. The other researchers were friendly enough, but Maya preferred working alone. She always had. It was easier to focus when she didn't have to worry about anyone else's schedule or safety. On her first day, Dr. Wilson, the station coordinator, gave her the standard safety briefing. He was a weathered man in his 50s who had spent most of his career in Alaska. "But weather changes fast out here," he warned her, pointing to the radio equipment. "Always check in every 4 hours. Always tell someone where you're going, and never, ever ignore a weather warning." Maya nodded politely, but she was already thinking about the remote inlet she wanted to study. It was about 15 miles from the station, accessible only by kayak, and according to her research, it was exactly where she needed to collect samples. The inlet was protected from most weather, tucked between 2 large cliffs that would shield her from wind. For the first 2 days, Maya worked close to the station, getting used to the equipment and the brutal cold. Alaska in March was nothing like the California beaches where she usually worked. Here, the air was so cold it hurt to breathe, and the water was cold enough to stop your heart in minutes. But Maya had always thrived in challenging conditions. She had learned to dive in some of the most difficult waters in the world. She had collected samples from coral reefs during storms and studied fish populations in areas where most people wouldn't dare to swim. Alaska was just another challenge to overcome. On the 3rd morning, Maya woke up to clear skies and calm water. She checked the weather forecast and saw that a storm system was moving in, but it wasn't expected until late afternoon. She had at least 8 hours of good weather, maybe more. It was the perfect opportunity to reach the remote inlet. She packed her gear carefully: waterproof sample containers, her underwater camera, emergency supplies, and her satellite beacon. The beacon was her lifeline if anything went wrong. She could press a button, and rescue teams would know exactly where she was. Maya clipped it to her life jacket and forgot about it. Dr. Wilson was in the radio room when she stopped by, too. "Check out where you headed today?" he asked, looking up from his weather charts. "Just doing some sampling work," Maya replied, being deliberately vague. She knew he would try to talk her out of going to the inlet. He would say it was too far, too risky, too close to the storm's path. But Maya had studied the maps for weeks. She knew exactly where she was going and how to get there safely. "Storm's coming in faster than expected," Dr. Wilson said, tapping the chart. "Might want to stay close to home today." Maya glanced at the forecast. The storm was still hours away, and she was an experienced kayaker. She had paddled in much. Worse conditions than this? "I'll be back before lunch," she said with a smile. "Promise." But as she loaded her kayak at the small dock, Maya made a decision that would change everything. Instead of just studying the inlet briefly and returning, she decided to set up a more comprehensive sampling station. If she was going to make this trip, she might as well make it count. She packed extra equipment and planned to spend several hours collecting data. The paddle out to the inlet was beautiful. The water was mirror smooth, reflecting the snow-covered mountains like a perfect photograph. Oh, Maya had never seen anything quite like it. In California, the ocean was always moving, always changing. Here, everything felt still and eternal. She reached the inlet around 10 in the morning and immediately got to work. The water was incredibly clear, and she could see all the way to the bottom, even at 20 feet deep. Her underwater camera captured amazing footage of fish species she had never seen before. This was exactly the kind of data that would make her research stand out. time seemed to disappear as Maya worked. She was completely absorbed in her research, diving again and again to collect samples and take measurements. The water was cold, but her wetsuit kept her warm enough to work. She had found several species that weren't supposed to exist this far north, suggesting that the ocean was warming faster than anyone had predicted. It was only when she surfaced from a particularly deep dive that Maya noticed the wind. What had been calm water an hour ago was now choppy with small whitecaps. She looked up at the sky and felt her stomach drop. Dark clouds were moving in from the west, much faster than the forecast had predicted. Maya quickly packed her equipment and pushed her kayak back into the water. She had been so focused on her work that she hadn't noticed the weather changing. The wind was picking up by the minute, and she could see snow beginning to fall in the distance. She paddled hard, trying to get out of the protected inlet and back into the main bay. But as soon as she cleared the cliffs, the full force of the storm hit her. The wind was howling now, creating waves that were much too big for safe kayaking. Snow was falling so hard that she could barely see 50 feet in any direction. Maya tried to turn back toward the inlet, but the wind was too strong. Her kayak was being pushed further and further from shore. She reached for her radio, but the static was so bad she couldn't get through to the station. The storm was interfering with all communications. Then a wave bigger than the rest caught her kayak sideways. Maya felt herself flipping over, the icy water rushing over her head. She managed to roll back up, but now she was soaked, and her kayak was half full of water. The cold was already seeping through her wetsuit, and she knew she was in serious trouble. She tried to paddle toward the nearest shore, but the waves were too big and the wind too strong. Her kayak flipped again, and this time she couldn't roll back up. She found herself in the water, her kayak floating away from her emergency beacon somewhere on the bottom of the bay. Maya swam as hard as she could toward the rocky shore, but the cold water was already affecting her muscles. Her movements were getting slower and clumsier. She knew she had maybe 10 minutes before hypothermia set in, maybe less. Somehow she managed to reach the rocky beach. She pulled herself out of the water and immediately started looking for shelter. The wind was so strong now that she could barely stand up, and the snow was falling so hard that she couldn't see more than a few feet in any direction. Maya found a small grove of trees and used the last of her strength to gather branches and debris. She managed to build a rough shelter against a large rock, but she knew it wouldn't be enough. She was soaked, the temperature was dropping fast, and no one knew exactly where she was. As the storm raged around her, Maya realized that she had made a terrible mistake. Her ambition and confidence had led her into a situation that might cost her everything. She was 15 miles from help, with no way to call for rescue, and the storm showed no signs of stopping. The woman who had always pushed boundaries had finally found one that pushed back. Maya's first night alone in the wilderness was the longest of her life. She huddled in her makeshift shelter, shivering uncontrollably as the storm raged outside. Her wet clothes were freezing against her skin, and she knew she had to get warm, or she wouldn't survive until morning. Using her scientific training, Maya forced herself to think logically. She needed to create heat, and she needed to stay dry. She gathered more branches and pine needles, stuffing them into her shelter to create insulation. Her hands were so cold she could barely move her fingers, but she kept working. The matches in her emergency kit were one of the few things that had stayed completely dry. With trembling hands, Maya managed to light a small fire using dry bark and twigs she found under a fallen log. The tiny flame felt like a miracle. She fed it carefully, knowing that this fire might be the only thing keeping her alive. As the night wore on, Maya took inventory of her supplies. She had 3 energy bars, a water bottle that was only half full, and a handful of waterproof matches. Her emergency beacon was gone, lost somewhere in the bay when her kayak flipped. Her radio was dead, destroyed by the salt water. But Maya was tougher than she looked. Growing up in a family that loved camping and hiking, she had learned basic survival skills as a child. She knew how to find shelter, how to make fire, and how to signal for help. She just had to stay calm and think clearly. When morning came, Maya felt a surge of hope. She had survived the night, and the storm was finally starting to weaken. She climbed to the highest point she could find and looked around, hoping to see the research station or any sign of civilization. But all she could see was endless wilderness. Mountains, trees, and snow stretching in every direction. Maya realized she was completely lost. In the storm and darkness, she had no idea which direction she had come from. The inlet where she had been working was hidden somewhere in the maze of cliffs and trees. Even if rescue teams were looking for her, they would never think to search this far from her planned route. She decided to stay put and focus on making herself visible to search aircraft. Using rocks and branches, Maya created a large SOS sign. In the snow, she kept her fire burning during the day, adding green branches to create smoke. Every few hours, she would climb up to her lookout point and scan the sky for helicopters or planes. By the third day, as food was running low, she had been rationing her energy bars, eating tiny pieces throughout the day, but she knew they wouldn't last much longer. She tried to catch fish in a small stream nearby, but the water was too cold and fast-moving. She had no fishing equipment, and her hands were too numb to grab anything. That's when Maya remembered something from a survival documentary she had watched years ago. Tree bark, especially from birch trees, was actually edible and nutritious. She found several birch trees near her shelter and carefully peeled off strips of the inner bark. It tasted terrible, like chewing on cardboard, but it gave her stomach something to work with. She also learned to melt snow for drinking water, though she had to be careful not to eat the snow directly. Eating snow would lower her body temperature even more, something she couldn't afford. Instead, she melted it over her fire and drank the lukewarm water slowly. The fourth day brought a new challenge. Maya heard howling in the distance. Wolves. She had read about Alaska's wolf population, but she had never expected to encounter them. The sound sent chills down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. She made sure to keep her fire burning bright all night, knowing that most wild animals were afraid of fire. On the fifth day, disaster struck again. While gathering firewood, Maya stepped in a hidden hole and twisted her ankle badly. The pain was intense, and she could barely put weight on her foot. Now she was not only lost and running out of supplies, but she was also injured. Maya knew she was in serious trouble. She could no longer climb to her lookout point to watch for aircraft. She could barely walk to the stream for water. Her ankle was swelling and she had no way to treat it properly. For the first time since the ordeal began, she felt truly hopeless. That night, Maya made a decision that surprised even her. She pulled out her waterproof camera and started recording a video message. Her voice was weak and shaky, but she wanted to document what was happening to her. Maybe someone would find the camera someday and understand what had occurred. "My name is Maya Rodriguez," she said to the camera, her breath visible in the cold air. "I'm a marine biologist, and I've been stranded in Alaska for 5 days now. I want my family to know that I love them, and I want them to know that I'm not giving up." As she recorded, Maya found herself thinking about her life in a way she never had before. She'd always been so focused on her career, so determined to prove herself in a competitive field. She had missed family gatherings for research trips, turned down dates because she was too busy with work, and pushed away friends who said she was becoming too obsessed with her career. "I always thought I was living life to the fullest." She continued recording, "But maybe I was just living life to the busiest? I wish I had spent more time with people I care about, instead of always chasing the next research project." The sixth day was the hardest yet. Maya's ankle was so swollen she could barely move. She was weak from lack of food and exhausted from the constant effort of staying warm. She had stopped climbing to her lookout point because she simply didn't have the energy. But Maya refused to give up, and she kept her fire burning and continued adding green branches to create smoke. She kept her SOS sign clear of snow. She kept hoping that someone, somewhere, was looking for her. On the seventh day, Maya heard something that made her heart race, the distant sound of a helicopter. She forced herself to crawl to her lookout point, dragging her injured ankle behind her. She could see the aircraft in the distance, but it was too far away to see her signals. Maya screamed and waved her arms, but the helicopter disappeared behind the mountains. She collapsed in the snow, crying for the first time since her ordeal began. She had been so close to rescue, but now she was alone again. The 8th day dawned clear and cold. Maya could barely move now. Her body was shutting down from the cold and lack of food. She had stopped recording video messages because she didn't have the strength to hold the camera steady. She lay in her shelter, drifting in and out of consciousness. But something deep inside Maya refused to quit. Maybe it was her scientific training, which had taught her to keep observing and analyzing even in the worst conditions. Maybe it was her stubborn personality which had gotten her into this mess, but might also get her out of it. Or maybe it was just the human will to survive. That mysterious force that keeps people fighting even when all hope seems lost. Maya crawled out of her shelter one more time and added fresh branches to her fire. She cleared snow from her SOS sign. She climbed to her lookout point, using a stick to support her injured ankle, and then she heard it again, the sound of a helicopter, closer this time. Maya waved her arms and screamed with what little voice she had left. She threw handfuls of snow into her fire, creating a thick column of white smoke against the blue sky. This time, the helicopter turned toward her. Alex Chen had been searching for the missing researcher for 3 days straight. As a search and rescue specialist with the Alaska State Troopers, he had seen his share of wilderness emergencies. But something about this case wouldn't let him rest. Most people didn't survive more than a few hours in conditions like these, yet his gut told him Maya Rodriguez was still out there somewhere. The official search had been called off after the 2nd day. The storm had been too severe, the area too vast, and the chances of survival too slim. But Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something. He had studied Maya's background. She was an experienced outdoor enthusiast, a scientist trained to think logically under pressure. If anyone could survive in the wilderness, it might be her. Alex knew the area better than most people. He had grown up in Alaska, spent his childhood hiking these mountains with his father. After serving as a medic in the military, he had returned home and dedicated his life to saving people in the wilderness. He understood how the land worked, how weather patterns moved, and most importantly, how people behaved when they were lost and scared. While other searchers had focused on the obvious areas, the main trails, the sheltered valleys, the places where a normal person might seek help, Alex thought differently. He studied Maya's research background and realized she would think like a scientist, not like a typical lost hiker. She would look for geological features that provided natural protection, places that offered resources for survival. On the morning of the 8th day, Alex made a decision that went against protocol. He took his helicopter up alone, flying a search pattern that covered areas other teams had dismissed as too remote. The weather was still dangerous, with high winds and poor visibility. But Alex's experience flying in Alaska's challenging conditions gave him confidence. He had been flying for 2 hours when he saw it, a thin column of smoke rising from a small valley between 2 ridges. It was exactly the kind of place a smart person would choose for shelter, protected from the worst of the wind, but still visible from the air. Alex felt his heart rate increase as he guided the helicopter toward the smoke. As he got closer, Alex could see a figure waving frantically near a small fire. Even from a distance, he could tell the person was in bad shape there. Movements were weak and unsteady. He quickly identified a small clearing where he could land safely, about 100 yards from the smoke signal. The landing was tricky in the gusty wind, but Alex managed to set the helicopter down without incident. He grabbed his medical kit and ran toward the figure, his boots crunching through the snow. What he found made his heart skip a beat. Was barely conscious, her lips blue with cold, her eyes unfocused. She was wearing clothes that had been soaked and frozen multiple times, and Alex could see that she was suffering from severe hypothermia. Her left ankle was badly swollen, and she was shivering uncontrollably. "I'm Alex," he said, kneeling beside her. "I'm here to help you. You're going to be okay." Maya tried to speak, but her voice was just a whisper. Alex could see that she was fighting to stay conscious, using every bit of strength she had left. He immediately began emergency warming protocols, wrapping her in thermal blankets and checking her vital signs. Her core body temperature was dangerously low, and Alex knew he had to work fast. He had seen hypothermia cases before, but rarely. Someone who had survived this long in such extreme conditions? Maya's pulse was weak and irregular, and her breathing was shallow. "Stay with me," Alex said, talking to her constantly as he worked. "I need you to keep your eyes open. Can you tell me your name?" "Maya," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "That's right, Maya, I'm going to get you out of here, but I need you to stay awake. Can you do that for me?" Alex carefully lifted Maya and carried her to the helicopter. Every step was crucial. Moving someone with severe hypothermia too quickly could cause their heart to stop. He placed her gently in the back of the aircraft and began connecting monitoring equipment. Alex never stopped talking to Maya. He had learned from his military experience that the sound of a calm, steady voice could be the difference between life and death for someone in critical condition. He told her about the rescue, about how impressed he was with her survival skills, about how she was going to be okay. "You did everything right," he said, checking her pulse for the 100th time. "Your fire, your shelter, your signals, you've saved your own life out there." Maya drifted in and out of consciousness during the flight, but Alex noticed that she seemed to respond to his voice. When he spoke to her, her vital signs stabilized slightly. When he was quiet, she seemed to slip further away. The hospital. Alex stayed with Maya as doctors worked to stabilize her condition. He watched as they carefully rewarmed her body, treated her frostbite, and addressed her dehydration. The medical team was amazed that she had survived 8 days in conditions that typically killed people within hours. "She's incredibly strong," one of the doctors told Alex. "Most people would have given up after the first night." Alex found himself visiting Maya every day during her recovery. At first, it was part of his official duties. He needed to complete his incident report and follow up on the rescue. But as Maya began to recover, Alex realized he was visiting for different reasons. There was something about Maya's determination that impressed him. She had faced impossible odds and refused to give up. Even now, as she dealt with the pain of recovery and the trauma of her experience, she maintained a positive attitude that Alex found inspiring. Maya's recovery was slow and difficult. The doctors worried about permanent damage to her feet from frostbite, and she struggled with anxiety and nightmares from her ordeal. But Alex was there through it all, bringing her books about Alaska's natural history and listening as she processed what had happened to her. "I keep thinking about those 8 days," Maya told him one afternoon. "I was so focused on my career, so determined to prove myself, but out there, none of that mattered. All that mattered was staying alive." Alex understood what she meant. His own experiences in the military had taught him that life could change in an instant, that the things people thought were important often weren't important at all. "You learned something out there that most people never learn," he said. "You learned what you're really made of." As the weeks passed, Alex found himself looking forward to his visits with Maya more and more. She was intelligent and curious, asking him questions about Alaska's wildlife and terrain. She was also surprisingly funny, making jokes about her ordeal that showed she was healing emotionally as well as physically. But Alex also noticed something else. Maya seemed reluctant to talk about returning to California. When her family called to discuss her flight home, she would change the subject. When her colleagues sent messages about her research, she would set them aside without reading them. "I don't know if I'm ready to go back to my old life," she admitted to Alex. "One day, everything seems different now. I feel different." Alex found himself hoping that Maya would stay in Alaska, though he couldn't quite admit to himself why. He told himself it was because she had been through a trauma and needed time to heal. But deep down he knew the truth. He was starting to care about Maya in a way that went beyond professional concern. The rescue that had started as just another emergency call was becoming something much more complicated. Alex had saved Maya's life, but somehow, in the process, she was beginning to change his life too. Maya should have gone home to California weeks ago. Doctors had cleared her for travel. Her family was worried sick, and her research team was asking when she would return to work. But every time she thought about leaving Alaska, Something held her back. She told herself it was because she needed to complete her research. The data she had collected before her accident was still valuable, and she could finish the project if she stayed a little longer. But Maya knew the real reason she was staying. It was Alex. Their friendship had grown slowly during her recovery. What started as official visits had become something much more personal. Alex would stop by the small apartment she was renting in Anchorage, bringing her coffee and stories about his latest rescue missions. They would talk for hours about everything and nothing: his childhood in Alaska, her work with marine life, their shared love of the outdoors. "I want to show you something," Alex said one sunny afternoon in late April, "but only if you feel up to it." Maya had been cleared for light outdoor activities, though her ankles still bothered her sometimes. She was eager to get back into nature, but this time with proper preparation and safety measures. Alex drove her to a beautiful lake about an hour outside the city. The ice was just beginning to melt, creating patterns on the water that looked like abstract art. Mountains reflected perfectly in the still water, and Maya felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced since before her accident. "This is where I come when I need to think," Alex said, setting up a small camp chair for her by the water's edge. "It's one of the few places in Alaska that's completely safe." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching birds land on the water and listening to the gentle sound of ice shifting in the distance. Maya realized this was the first time since her rescue that she felt completely relaxed outdoors. "Can I ask you something?" Maya said. "Why did you keep looking for me when everyone else had given up?" Alex was quiet for a long moment. "I lost people during my time in the military," he said finally. "People I should have been able to save. I guess I've spent my whole career trying to make up for that." Maya could hear the pain in his voice. She had noticed that Alex rarely talked about his military service, and now she understood why. He carried the weight of losses that weren't really his fault, just like she had carried the pressure of proving herself in her career. "You can't save everyone," Maya said gently. "But you saved me." "You saved yourself," Alex replied. "I just gave you a ride home." Over the following weeks, Alex became Maya's guide to Alaska's safer wilderness areas. He taught her advanced survival techniques, showed her how to read weather patterns more accurately, and helped her understand the rhythms of the northern landscape. Maya, in return, shared her scientific knowledge about the ecosystems they explored. They made a good team. Alex's practical experience combined with Maya's academic training created a deeper understanding of the wilderness than either could achieve alone. More importantly, they enjoyed each other's company in a way that surprised them both. But their relationship wasn't without challenges. Maya's family was becoming increasingly concerned about her extended stay in Alaska. Her mother called every few days asking when she was coming home and whether she was making decisions based on trauma rather than clear thinking. "Sweetheart, you've been through something terrible," her mother said during one particularly difficult phone call. "Maybe you're not thinking clearly right now. Maybe you should come home and give yourself time to heal properly." Maya understood her family's concerns, but she also felt frustrated that they couldn't see how much she had grown during her time in Alaska. She wasn't running away from her trauma. She was working through it in her own way. Alex had his own doubts about their relationship. He worried that Maya's feelings for him were based on gratitude rather than genuine attraction. He had seen it before with people he had rescued. They often developed strong emotional attachments to their rescuers that faded once they returned to normal life. "Are you sure this is real?" he asked Maya one evening as they watched the sunset. "From a hilltop outside the city? I mean, what we have. Are you sure it's not just because I pulled you out of the wilderness?" Maya had been expecting this question. "You think I'm that confused about my own feelings?" she asked. "You think I don't know the difference between gratitude and something deeper?" "I think you've been through something that changes people," Alex said carefully. "I think maybe you need more time to figure out who you are now." Their first real argument came when Maya insisted on returning to the site where she had been stranded. She needed to face the place where she had almost died, to prove to herself that she could handle being there without panic. Alex was against the idea from the beginning. "There's no reason to put yourself through that," he said. "You've already proven how strong you are." But Maya was determined. "I need to do this, Alex. I need to show myself that I'm not afraid anymore." Reluctantly, Alex agreed to guide her to the site. They took a boat this time instead of kayaks, and they brought enough safety equipment for a small army, Alex insisted. On checking weather conditions multiple times before they left, and he made Maya promise to leave immediately if she felt overwhelmed. The trip to the inlet was beautiful but tense. Maya felt her heart rate increase as they approached the cliffs, where she had been trapped. When they reached the small beach where she had built her shelter, Maya sat quietly for several minutes, remembering those 8 terrible days. "I was so scared," she said finally. "But I was also angry. Angry at myself for being careless, angry at the weather, angry at everything." Alex watched her carefully, ready to leave if she showed any signs of distress. But instead of panic, he saw something else in Maya's face: acceptance and peace. "I'm different now," Maya continued. "It's not because of what happened to me, but because of what I learned about myself. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought, but I also learned that being strong doesn't mean doing everything alone." That evening, back in Anchorage, Maya made a decision that surprised even her. She called her research director in California and asked for an extended leave of absence. She wanted to stay in Alaska through the summer, to continue working with Alex and to explore this new version of herself.
Oh.
"Are you sure about this?" Alex asked when she told him about her decision. "I'm sure about you," Maya replied. "I'm sure about us. Everything else we can figure out as we go." But even as Maya made this commitment, she knew that bigger decisions were coming. Her leave of absence was temporary, and eventually she would have to choose between her established career in California and this new life she was building in Alaska. Alex knew it too. He'd started researching opportunities to work in other states, positions that would allow him to maintain his search and rescue expertise while being closer to Maya's world. But he hadn't told her about his research yet, unsure whether she would want him to make such a big change. They were both falling in love, but they were also both scared of what that love might require them to give up. The wilderness had brought them together, but now they had to figure out if their connection was strong enough to survive the complications of real life. Summer in Alaska was unlike anything Maya had ever experienced. The days were long and bright, with the sun barely setting even at midnight. She and Alex spent countless hours exploring the wilderness together, each adventure strengthening their bond while also testing their ability to work as a team. Maya was learning that love after trauma was complicated. It wasn't just about finding someone who made her happy, it was about finding someone who understood the person she was becoming, someone who could accept both her strength and her vulnerability. By September, Maya knew she couldn't put off the decision any longer. Her extended leave was ending, and the University of California was expecting her back. She'd been offered a promotion, a chance to lead her own research team and study climate change impacts on marine ecosystems. It was everything she had worked for her entire career, but leaving Alaska meant leaving Alex. And Maya wasn't sure she was ready for that. Over the summer, their relationship had grown into something beautiful and real. They had explored glaciers together, watched northern lights dance across the sky, and shared quiet moments that felt more meaningful than anything Maya had experienced before. "You have to go," Alex said one evening as they sat by a campfire. "Near Denali National Park. This is your dream job. You can't give up everything you've worked for." Maya stared into the flames, feeling torn between two very different lives. "What if I don't want the same things I used to want?" she asked. "What if nearly dying changed what matters to me?" Alex had been thinking about this moment for weeks. He had found a position with the National Park Service in California that would let him continue search and rescue work while being closer to Maya, but he hadn't told her about it yet. I'm sure whether it was the right choice. "Maybe we both need to figure out who we are when we're not together," he said quietly. "Maybe 3 months apart will help us understand if this is real or if it's just Alaska magic." Maya felt her heart break a little at his words, but she also knew he was right. They had been living in a beautiful bubble all summer, away from the pressures and realities of their normal lives. She needed to know if her feelings for Alex would survive in the real world. The goodbye at the airport was harder than either of them expected. Maya had thought she was prepared for it, but when the moment came to walk through security, she found herself crying for the first time since her rescue. "I'll call you every day," Alex promised, holding her close. "Don't," Maya said, surprising herself. "Let's give it a month. See how we feel when we're back in our real lives." Back in California, Maya threw herself into her new position. She hired new research assistants, planned ambitious field studies, and worked longer hours than ever before. Her colleagues were impressed with her energy and focus, but Maya felt like she was acting a part in a play about her old life. Everything that had once excited her about marine biology now felt routine. The competitive atmosphere of academic research, which had once motivated her, now seemed pointless. She found herself missing the simple clarity of survival, the honest beauty of Alaska's wilderness, and the genuine connection she had felt with Alex. Her friends and family were relieved to have her back to normal. But Maya didn't feel normal at all. She felt like she was pretending to be the person she used to be,
Wearing her old personality like a costume that no longer fit.
3 weeks into her return, Maya received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a photograph of the inlet where she had been stranded, but this time it was taken during summer. The water was calm and blue, reflecting peaceful skies. On the back, Alex had written, "This place isn't scary anymore, neither is loving someone." Maya stared at the photo for a long time, remembering not just the terror of those 8 days, but also the strength she had discovered in herself. She thought about Alex's steady presence during her recovery, the way he had taught her to trust the wilderness again, and the quiet moments when they had simply enjoyed being together. That evening, Maya did something she hadn't done since returning to California. She called Alex. "I miss you," she said without any greeting. "I miss you too," he replied, and she could hear the smile in his voice. They talked for 3 hours, sharing everything that had happened since she left. Alex told her about a rescue mission where he had thought of her survival skills. Maya told him about a research presentation where she had realized that her time in Alaska had actually enhanced her scientific perspective rather than derailing it. "I've been thinking about something," Alex said, toward the end of their call. "What if there was a way for both of us to have what we want? What if we didn't have to choose between our careers and each other?" The next morning, Maya found an email from Alex with a job posting attached. The National Park Service was looking for a marine biologist to study ecosystem changes in Alaska's coastal parks. The position would be based in Anchorage, with frequent field work throughout the state. Maya read the job description 3 times, her heart racing. It was perfect, combining her expertise with her newfound love for Alaska's wilderness. But more than that, it represented a chance to build a life that honored both who she had been and who she was becoming. She applied that same day, 2 months later. Maya stood in front of a conference room full of scientists, presenting her research on survival adaptations in marine ecosystems. But this wasn't just any presentation. It was her job interview with the National Park Service. And Alex was sitting in the back row, having driven down from Alaska to support her. Maya's presentation was unlike anything she had ever given before. She combined hard scientific data with personal insights from her survival experience, showing how extreme circumstances could reveal hidden resilience in both animals and humans. Near-death experience had given her a unique perspective on adaptation and survival that enhanced rather than limited her scientific work. Dr. Rodriguez, one of the panel members, said after her presentation, "This research is remarkable. Your personal experience seems to have deepened your scientific understanding rather than compromising it." Maya smiled, glancing at Alex. "You have to lose everything to find out what you're really capable of," she said. She got the job. 6 months later, Maya was back in Alaska, but this time as a respected scientist with the National Park Service rather than a stranded researcher. She and Alex had found a small house in Anchorage with views of the mountains. They were building a life together that neither of them could have imagined a year earlier. Maya's work now took her throughout Alaska's wilderness, but always with proper safety protocols and usually with Alex as her guide. She was studying how climate change was affecting marine life in ways that could help protect entire ecosystems. Her survival experience had made her a more careful researcher, but also a more intuitive one. Alex had never been happier. His work with the Park Service allowed him to continue saving people while also protecting the wilderness he loved. Having Maya as a partner meant having someone who truly understood both the beauty and the danger of Alaska's landscape. One evening, exactly 1 year after Maya's rescue, they returned to the inlet where it all began. This time, they came by boat with full safety equipment, and they weren't running from a storm. "I used to think this place almost killed me," Maya said, looking at the peaceful water. "But now I think it saved me, showed me who I really am. When everything else is stripped away." Alex took her hand, thinking about the scared, hypothermic woman he had pulled from this wilderness a year ago, and comparing her to the confident, joyful person standing beside him now. "We both got rescued?" "That day," he said. "I just didn't realize it at the time." Maya looked at him with surprise. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I had been going through the motions of living without really being alive," Alex explained. "Focused on saving other people because I was afraid to save myself. You taught me that it's okay to want something more than just duty." The sun set over the inlet, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Maya realized that survival meant more than just staying alive. It meant having the courage to build a life worth living, to love deeply, despite the risks, and to trust that sometimes the most unexpected paths lead to the most beautiful destinations. Maya Rodriguez had indeed survived against impossible odds. But more than that, she had learned to truly live.